G'day fans and welcome back to another exciting episode of DNA Reviews. Good old Andor is halfway through its first season. How exciting is this? And as always, it is like divided the fan base because some people say it's as slow as a wet week, while other people go, the slowness is actually a good thing. Mr. Aaron, how are you going this evening from the Star Wars front, mate?
Well, as you know, I'm leading the busy life at the moment, so Andor's been just the right pace for me. How have you been?
Absolutely love the sound of that too. And it's very funny. I caught up with some people on Saturday, two people in particular, Star Wars fans. One person said they loved it, the other one said they couldn't stand it. So I was like, talk about splitting the divide. But tonight we're talking about good old episode 5, The Axe Forgets, which is a particularly groovy one with a whole lot of good stuff going on. And as always, I was like, it's all a talk fest. Nothing really happened at all, but there are some spoilers if you're that way inclined and you don't want to know what you're missing out on, or you don't want to be ruined. By now you should have seen it because they came out last Wednesday. And I tell you what, there's a lot going on in this particular episode, Mr. Aaron, even if we didn't actually see much at all.
I think the thing with this, sometimes I feel it's almost got the pacing of maybe some of the good seasons of Game of Thrones, where you have a talking politics episode, then it's followed up by a lot of action. And I'm figuring this is a talking episode, and we're about to get an action one.
One thing that the show does have going for it, and I agree with you, if you're not a fan of slow pacing, you'll miss this. But if you don't mind the slow pace, you get to learn about all the characters, even the ones you don't care about, and you don't even know what their names are. But you pick up all these things from these different people. And it's even background characters, people who are just sort of in the distance. And you're sort of not necessarily invested in their fate, but at least you know who they are and what their motivations are. And I've got to admit, that kind of really worked for me. So once again, yeah, it's as we said, it's as slow as, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, depending on who you're talking to. But yeah, for younger people, I can imagine, mate, it's too much. It's as boring as. But yes, very, very good. Gavin said, Andor, no, he doesn't know of us yet. Yes, you do, Mr. Gavin. You're only just having your shit stir with us. All right, so we kick it all off in poor old Cyril's bedroom, Cyril Khan. And as we've discovered in the previous episodes, he's now got a lot of thinking time. Now, what I've done is I've condensed all the different areas of the show together. So I've put all the Cyril Khan stuff together in one set of slides, so we don't have to keep jumping backwards and forwards. And what I liked about this is the first thing you get to see is like, oh, is that sunlight up in the sky? But of course it's not, because he's living on level 91 and the numbers get higher the lower you go. So he's 91 levels under the ground. So I thought this was a particularly cool moment because you can clearly see the guy wants to get out and about, but he's kind of housebound at the moment. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think it's one of the things where obviously he's done bad, and now it's the contemplating what to do next episode, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly right. I love this from William. He's not watching the show as in like Andor. He's only here because there's nothing on TV to watch. So we're the best of a bad choice. Is that right there, Mr. William? But hey, at least you're here with us. You never know. And I like that Christy, yeah, Mummy sent him to his room. It kind of feels that way, doesn't it, eh?
Yeah.
So, and we get to learn more about his home life very, very soon. Now, this, I cracked up when I saw this, right? I thought there's an absolute ripper. Blue milk returns. How good's this, Mr. Aaron? The old milk has come back. But then, of course, you've got to ask yourself, what's he actually eating? What cereal is it? And of course, it's got to be this.
I actually thought it looked like choc mint aero bar Cocoa Pops or something like that.
Could be too. He even holds one of them up and chucks them back in the thing. So
yeah,
I do love that. So in other words, this is, I think, their C way of saying that he's still being treated like a little child, even though he's clearly an adult. But I did thought it was funny. It's like, oh my God, blue milk, come back. Yeah, blue heaven milk. Yeah, exactly right. So I thought that was particularly cool. And this whole sequence with him and his mother is just nothing, but they're sitting and talking, right? So it's like they don't even get up and move around, in a lot of TV shows and that, just to make things visually interesting. Characters will shift and move and do whatever. And one's talking to the camera and the other one's looking at the back of their head and all this sort of thing. Not even that. They're just sitting there at the table facing each other. And apparently Cyril's mother has a name, and it's Edie. I don't know if you knew that or not. And she keeps making references to calling in a favor from Uncle Harlow. Doesn't that just sound like crime bossish? He's part of the mafia or something like that. So Good old Uncle Harlow. What do you reckon?
Yeah, it was like when Carrie Fisher in the Blues Brothers is talking about calling in her final favors, and it all sounds like very mafia type stuff, doesn't it?
It does. And of course, then we cut away to a whole lot of other stuff in the show. Then we come back to, once again, he's still eating cereal and he's with his mother again, Edie. And she makes another reference to having called Uncle Harlow, and he's overheard the conversation. And it's like, this sounds like a really shifty puppy. And I found that was really interesting. So who is Uncle Harlow? So you do wonder what the deal is with that. And I like the fact that she said to Uncle Harlow that Khan's mistake was deeply educational. What do you reckon of that?
I know it is one of those things. I think by the static positioning of the camera, they're sort of nailing their colours to the wall with how they want this to go down. And then when you do have lines like that, you find it quite funny, don't you?
Well, that's right. And of course, that just begs all these questions like, who is this dude? Where is Khan going to end up? So he goes back to his room. Now, as I said, the thing jumps around a little bit, and I'm just putting it all together. And this was an interesting moment, right? Now, there's two bits that come up here. First thing is, he's got clone trooper action figures in the background. They're definitely clone troopers. You can tell from the size of the gun because clone troopers were notorious having really, really big ass rifles, right? And the way this kneeling position is, that's a clone trooper kneeling position. So he's got clone trooper action figures, Mr. Aaron. What do you reckon?
Well, I don't know. Maybe I do think he is one of the people who prefers the Imperial rule. So maybe they're not action figures. Maybe they're sort of statuettes that he admires.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I don't mean action figures that you play with. You are right. They're statues, but they're clearly clone troopers. So, because like some people thought, and I thought this, maybe they're stormtroopers, but you can see the narrowness of the helmet up there. And they're definitely, because stormtroopers have wider helmets. So it's definitely clone troopers. So, you do wonder, you probably got those as a kid when the Clone Wars was on, and and the whole thing with the Republic, and it's like, oh, the Separatists are bastards and all this sort of thing. And of course, in the end, if you got clone troopers from his perspective are the bad guys because they ended up being part of what was the Republic. And of course, the Separatists ended up becoming the Empire. And of course, he was part of the corporate sector authority on Morlana 1 who supported the Empire. So,
yeah,
go figure that.
There you go. Or maybe he just picked them up at the Coruscant show in a show bag.
Oh, yeah, good stuff. Well, that's exactly right. You've got to think about show bags at the moment, haven't you, eh? And then, of course, I mentioned this 2 episodes ago, and I think this is really, really driving home what's going on. So this whole static home life and the fact he's eating the cereal and the Uncle Harlow embarrassing phone calls and all this sort of stuff is leading to this moment. And I made a mention in about 2 episodes back that he's having his own Javert moment, which is from Les Miserables. Les Miserables for Australians. And you can see that he's just going to go out. He's going to be just completely dogged and determined to find Cassian because as far as he's concerned, Cassian is what brought everything undone. Not him, Cassian. And do you agree with that at all?
Yeah, I do. They're definitely setting it up as sort of a slow burn. That's the way he's going to go. So, and I do think you're right, pulling in the parables from Les Miserables. Yeah, that's a cool point of view, I think, actually.
Yeah. I mean, I noticed it a couple of episodes ago, and it's like, who am I going to blame for all these cock-ups? I won't blame me. I'll blame this dude. If it wasn't for him, the world would still be good. So we'll have to see where that all goes. But at this stage, trying to predict his future path is actually quite difficult. So we then jump around back to Aldhani. And I thought this was funny, right? So we're looking at good old Cassian's armory. It sort of reminds me of the Mandalorian's armory, Din Djarin in what was it, one of those episodes where he had to put it all through the scanner at the airport. And it's like there's something for everyone, isn't there? And I'll tell you what, this really still does look like the Blade Runner gun, good old Deckard's gun with the big ass bit at the bottom. But I thought this was a kind of little moment. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I thought the same thing too. I think even in silhouette, we looked at the toys on the other show we do, and even that in silhouette looks like a Blade Runner gun. And then you've got the other little things there. And what I do think is good, he's obviously not the same level as the Mandalorian. So he's got kit, but it's not as shiny and it's not as much. It's more, I guess, a freebooter kit rather than a bounty hunter kit.
Yeah, no, I totally agree there. And I like the fact that it's pointed out that he's got a gun from somewhere that he shouldn't have gotten it from. And of course, he doesn't say who owned it previously because he's got no idea. So there's a lot of talking. Everything's talking in the show, right? So there's nothing really to look at visually. So good old Arvin Screen, I think his name is. There's a whole thing about the fact that they've been on Aldhani for months. And I thought, you try and put that into context and say, okay, we've got this mission. We've landed on Aldhani. We've gotten ourselves established. But the thing isn't going to happen until like February next year, March next year. That's a long time to just sit and wait it out. So I thought that was a real interesting sort of moment. And because we're sort of seeing this, we got the whole thing with the crate head with the barcode. And I thought that's interesting using the barcode kind of concept in the Star Wars universe. So they may have done it before. I can't remember where. But it's something called the crate head. And we're not entirely sure what that is. But there's a reference here that Cassian was in a SIPO youth center when he was 13, which actually turns out to be 13 years before the Battle of Yavin. And of course, you've got to ask yourself, what is a SIPO? Now, at the moment, it's not mentioned anywhere. Now, I think it's an amalgamation of 2 words, SI and the PO. The PO could be police, but it certainly shows that he had a difficult upbringing. And as I've suggested, even when Marva picked him up from Canary way back when, maybe he was just a rebellious kid from the beginning and never ever settled down and got himself into a life of crime and ended up in youth centres and here, there, and everywhere. So I know there's a lot to sort of draw into that, but I was curious about the SIPO Youth Centre. I've been trying to figure it out what it could be, but I just can't put it together.
It is one of those things where you get a couple of lines like that in a Star Wars show or in a Star Wars movie, and it's just sort of sounds alien, but then they've just put it in there to sound alien, and then a month or two later, someone writes a book about it. Or you get a comic come out about it, which could possibly happen.
Well, I get the feeling that when the Empire took control, there's a lot of stuff going on in regards to imprisoning people, because there's a comment here about building a lot of cages. And a lot of people were put into custody, and young people, because both these guys would have been relatively young back then. And that's where that line comes from, the axe forgets, but the tree remembers, which is actually a line from a book, or not a book that was released only like 3 years ago. So I thought it was like hundreds of years back would have been where the quote came from, but it turns out not to be the case at all. But there's a lot of backstory here between a lot of people, and as to whether we'll learn anything more about it, probably not. It could be just dialogue that's just there that makes it all interesting, doesn't mean anything. I don't know, but we'll probably never really learn or know.
I do think as well that is the first time they've used barcodes like we have in Star Wars. And I also thought when I saw that tattoo, you have the different factions like Red Dawn and things like that. The top logo looked almost like one of those kind of factions that'll come into it down the track. But that's just me guessing.
It's a good guess. You're talking about the one up here. So yeah, you do wonder. It's not important, but it'd be just curious to sort of know, just for completeness than completeness than anything else. But otherwise, they may have just dangled that in and said, you know what, we're not going to ever discuss it ever again. It may come out or could be covered in a book or a novel or a comic at some point, and nobody really cares, nobody really knows. But either way, the point being that when Marva picked up Cassian from Canary, it's like, oh, I got the mother-son relationship. It's just gone all pear-shaped after that. Now, whether she was obviously a criminal herself, a scavenger and whatever else, whether he followed her footsteps and just ended down these dark paths is anybody's guess. But clearly, from that point to this point, just everything's just been, he's had a hard life, and it's not been a very happy one. And unfortunately, it's not going to get any better. So I thought that was interesting. So yeah, very, very cool. What it does tell us is that at least he didn't come from some big penthouse in like 5 or 6 years ago, leading a rich and extravagant lifestyle, and it all just went down the gurgler. No, it's just been rough the whole way through. So you can understand his point of view about not trusting people and not wanting to be touched. This is an interesting one. So it's been pointed out that Cinta, that's the lady on the left, right, sorry, already sharing a blanket. And I thought that's funny because they're all sleeping in hammocks. So I don't know how they would be doing that. But it's been suggested that she's in a relationship with Vel, who's on the left, because they often appear together in the same scene. So just an interesting observation. So, yeah, I don't know if you picked up on that at all, just a throwaway line. But if that's okay, good on them.
I didn't notice that. Often, though, when they edit stuff, it might have been one of those things that was a subplot, and then when they tighten it up, it's all cut away. So you just are left with something like that, where they are sharing a blanket, but there's never any backstory to it. It could just be an editing thing, or it could have meant to be like that, and we never know.
Well, it is interesting because if it is Cinta, all the shots that they appear in together, there's just no connection. There's no talk to each other. They're not doing. There's no indication whatsoever. It was just, I think somebody suggested it as a possible theory. I thought, fair enough.
That just proves they're married then.
Absolutely, Lel. But all right, so we're going to jump way over the other side of the universe to good old Coruscant, back into this room. We missed the feast, unfortunately. They didn't show that. So you do wonder if they ever filmed it or were never going to in the first place. Good old, a lot of people really aren't liking Perrin at all because he can't even remember the driver's name. But I thought by the same token, he doesn't need to. But he's enjoying life as it is. And of course, this is where we discover that Mon's got a kid and Leader. And it's like, there's tension in the family. Yeah, it's like Mon wants to take Leader somewhere. Leader can't be fag, wants to go with the father. It is not good at all. And a few people are already starting to like her attitude. Leader's attitude. She's only been on screen for a handful of minutes, but I did find it interesting. She's sort of channeling the Padawan braids with the hairstyle. Now you do wonder if that's intentional or not. What do you reckon? The double Padawan.
I think that's probably more of a coincidence. I don't think so, but you never know. The other thing I thought was interesting, the opening scene when they went into it, it was very like the Bespin, dinner where Vader is waiting for them. That setup looks down and it's white and almost got the same kind of Art Deco walls and things like that. So I thought that was an interesting echoing. And it is interesting to see that Mon Mothma has the family issues going on with like friction with her husband and a moody teenager, and obviously implications of other stuff going on too. You don't see that very much in Star Wars.
No, you don't, because when the daughter was appearing, I was like, oh, she's got a daughter. Oh, good for her. I was like, okay, this is going to be one big happy family, and there's just tension from the outset, and clearly Lita is siding with Perrin, and there's a reason for that too, which we're going to bring up, because as we've said here, that Lita accuses Mon of being self-centered, and she's not. She's focusing all on the alliance that she can't tell anybody about, but clearly people are picking up that there are secrets there. So Lita's obviously going to sort of like lean towards Perrin. And it must be hard on Mothma's character, because she says, I can't tell you what I'm doing, but I'm actually doing it for the right reasons. But unfortunately, that just brings tension in the family. And as Hope noted here, Mon is right. Perrin would be loving this. Oh, mate, mother-daughter angst. How good's this? Because he knows that Lita's on his side. So, you got to think poor Mothma's having a hard day at the office with this. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I do get the feeling he's probably the cooler dad that lets her get away with stuff and they do the fun stuff. But when it all comes down with the Empire, I'll tell you which one will be on the right side then. But it is interesting to see this kind of family dynamic in Star Wars.
So that's an interesting point. So once the alliance becomes established in the next couple of years, and I think this whole thing about the robbing I'm going to bring this up later on, stealing all the money from the base, the alliance will have all this funding and get established. But of course, they don't get their first victory until Rogue One, right? They really get established then. So Mon is still in charge of the whole lot. You can imagine these two, Perrin and Lita in particular, they are very pro-Imperial. It's like, mate, the world is good. I've got nothing to complain about. And Lita probably goes to an exclusive and expensive school where everybody's going, the Empire is awesome, because in their life, the thing's always been there. So if, depending on her age, she may have been born on Empire Day or just after or before or whatever. So for her, nothing's ever been different. So you can see that living that privileged life is going to make them a tad one-sided in their viewpoints. What do you reckon?
And you've got to remember his drinking buddies are Massamita and Sly Moore, which and he doesn't say that in like he's in awe of them or that he's scared of them. They're just like the buddies that hang out. And that's like right up there with the worst of the worst when it comes to in cahoots with the Emperor.
Yeah, exactly right. So as Gavin said, it's typical political family in a chaos. And yeah, it does go to what it's showing is that despite all the privilege and all the money and all the power, everybody's not happy. And there's later shots where we get really good examples of that. Now, I found this interesting. We're back to Aldani again, right? I've forgotten who it was. One of the characters gives Cassian this whatever it's called, right? And as he says, it's old school technology, reliable, sturdy, easy to fix. And I thought, is this the filmmakers or / the writers' way of saying it's an analogy about how our real world is so complicated? A lot of people would say a long time ago, if something broke, you could fix it yourself. You could control it and understand it and run it. But now we live in such a high-tech digital planet that if something breaks, you can't fix it. It's someone else, somewhere in the ether that you can't control. And I wouldn't be surprised if somebody's trying to send a bit of a message there saying that it's great that we've got all this modern technology in our world, but if it goes cockeyed, and ironically we had the thing with Optus recently with a hack, you can't fix it yourself. It's just not physically possible. I don't know. I'm reading too much into it, but that's how I interpreted this whole sequence. So yeah.
I think, the Republic time, you'd be getting the things you could repair yourself. And in the Imperial time, you're getting the, like, I guess, Apple products that have already self-determined age that they will conk out on you and you have to buy a new one.
That's a good point, actually. Yeah, exactly. I like this one. Gavin said it's either a Polaroid camera or a Viewmaster. Yeah, you're right. It could be either. But I think there's, because the fact that he brings this thing up now, whether this thing ever appears again in another scene, who knows? But they brought it up for a specific reason. And of course, he mentions here about the pace of oppression outstrips our ability to understand it. And that's another thing that's happening in, like, an analogy in our real world. Things change that quickly. Before you even realize, hang on, what's actually happened? It's too late. It's the changes occurred and you can't go back to how it was. And you go, everything seems positive at the outset. But when you sit and analyze, you go, well, actually, every positive produces a negative regardless of what it is. And I don't know. As I said, I thought it was some interesting dialogue. So, yeah, I don't know. As I said, I'm probably reading too much into it, but they must have put it in for a reason. So yeah,
it is interesting because some people only enjoy entertainment if it can relate it to real world experiences and it reflects in fiction a real world issue, and other people look at entertainment as purely entertainment and they want to leave the real world issues behind. And it is interesting with Star Wars. We've had shows which are purely fantasy and other shows like this one which are more rooted in reality. So I just guess it shows that Star Wars is now producing products on a whole lot of different levels. This is definitely not a kid's show. Kids are not going to sit through this because it's boring. So I do like there is that sort of diverse range in Star Wars where you can pick the level of mood you want to watch, I guess, at the moment.
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. Oh, you're right. Star Wars, by definition, is escapism, and all of a sudden we've got the complete polar opposite. And it's like, no, we're going to bring it all back to real life, and we're going to make it slow and painful, and you're going to just have to deal with it if you want to watch it. As he said about the fact that Rebels need to rely on old hardware, which is true. That will be the case. So it could be a sort of a surreptitious sort of link as to what their future is going to be like. But I thought it was just interesting because there's a lot of discussion about this particular device, which ultimately means nothing. But I think there could be more to it if you sort of delve underneath. This I liked, right? So it's the return of a good old-fashioned book, right? And the book is what he's holding in his left hand, which is over this side, right? And I thought, you just don't see books in the Star Wars universe. Now, of course, we saw them in, was it Rise of Skywalker or was it Last Jedi? Last Jedi, because they're not page-turners. Hopefully this one is. But, and of course, can't imagine someone actually physically handwriting in the Star Wars universe, but a good old-fashioned book. A diary. I loved it because he's writing his manifesto or whatever it is, or his memoir. So how good's that?
I think even in episode 2 and 3, where you go to the Jedi library and they have the librarians, that you don't actually see physical books. It's all electronic still, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think that's intentional. It's meant to be, you press a screen, it all pops up and the words just appear. But the fact that he's got an actual book. And once again, the prop department have said, oh, do you want something futuristic and spacey? They said, no, we want an actual physical book with a cover around it and everything. All you needed was the pencil on the rubber band. So
yeah. And I think the other thing, just going back to what Ad said about the Rebels rely on old technology, it is a theme through a lot of Star Wars. You have on a basic level the Jawas, but coming into the sequels, you've got Rey, and what does she do? She scavenges too, because it's probably easier to find already existing technology than make your own in some places. And you're looking at these outposts, and they're goat farmers. So it is that sort of difference between living on Coruscant and having your apple shop there to go to, or living in Whoop Whoop where you get what comes through on tourists. It is an interesting concept to look at as well.
I totally agree. Gavin said here about old stuff can be more reliable than the new tech means new problems, which is effectively what you said. I mean, your Apple iStore could be the greatest thing in the universe. Pull out the power plug, everything breaks. So, there's something in that for everybody. So there you go. Greg has made a point, and I do like this. He loves how Andor is showing us the more mundane in the Star Wars universe, and that's why it's working. But by the same token, it's not for everybody, and we've discussed this ad infinitum in previous episodes. And you can imagine some people's going, mate, where are the laser blasters? And so far, we haven't seen anybody fire a gun since the first episode. Third episode, I suppose, a bit of firing. But the past 2 episodes have been pretty quiet. So
what you brought up right from the beginning, and I totally agree, this is more a Blade Runner story set in the Star Wars universe. Everything that happens, sometimes I go, I could see Deckard doing this. I could see this being a Blade Runner mission kind of thing.
Yep, totally agree with you. Now, this is a very quick one. I couldn't help but have a laugh when they showed this sequence. They're talking about like part of the plan. I thought, will Kenner, the toy company, make a play set out of this design, or they do it out of Karras? I couldn't think of the guy's name. Karras's base model. I reckon that'll be an action figure play set before you know it. What do you reckon, Mr.?
It'll be one, or one that's a HasLab one where you have to crowdfund it to get this massive play set that comes along. And you get the Bantha as well as a bonus.
Oh, yeah, very good. And you get to burn the model at the end of it because that's what they do here. So, it's very, very cool. One a bit more swearing. Cassian's ass is on the line, which I love it. And, of course, there's a flaw in the plan after all this time. They've got no one to fly this particular bit of machinery, so he's got to come in there and do what he's got to do. And now, what I'm appreciating is that in normal movies like this, somebody will say, haven't you got anybody to fly it? And they'll go, no. And you go, all right, I'll fly it. Done. But in this, there's a massive argument between them. He said, why haven't you figured this out yet? Is it going to be there? And they've really stretched it out as if it's a real world conversation. And I really appreciate that, because one of the things that happens in a lot of these movies, they go, cut out all the excess rubbish. Just get straight to the point. It's over there. Go for it. And you go, well, hang on. What are the repercussions if you do that? And so they're really fleshing this out. And that's why the detail in a lot of the conversations is really well thought out. It's not the kind of thing you could say, why didn't they do this? Or why didn't they do that? They actually say why they're not doing this or doing that. And I'm really dialing into it. But it does take a couple of watches, a couple of views to really get it to sink in. Because typically filmmaking cuts out the excess, but they're putting it all in and leaving it in, which is fantastic.
And I think that's the crux of why some people love it and some people are absolutely loathing it, because some people don't like that excess and like it cut out, and other people like that extra stuff. It's almost like the Andor version is the director's cut of a movie where you see where they've gone and put a whole lot of the actual character stuff on, where the studio's gone, has to come in at 90 minutes. So you've got to lose 30 minutes of character stuff. So it really does depend. I mean, neither is better or worse because everyone's view is subjective. So it's really hard for this to find an audience specifically because it is different.
And that's a good point because, I mean, it's a long show, so they've obviously got a lot more time to do things. But by the same token, from what I've seen so far, nothing has just been put in for the sake of just putting it in or extended for the sake of extending. Everything means something, even if you have to do a bit of digging to find it. And you go, why are we talking about like the Polaroid camera earlier? What's the deal with that? But there's something in the words that make it work. It's just not invented rubbish. And I don't know. I think it's actually very, very groovy. And there's more of this stuff coming up, which I was really dialed into. And I thought, that is interesting, but we'll cover that off in a couple of slides' time. And of course, as you just sort of pointing this out again, a goat can never have too many, never have too many horns. Oh, I loved it. I thought that was actually hysterical. So you got to love your goats. And I don't even know where this is leading us. Now, this is what I was suggesting, right? They're pointing out where the thing's going to be and where somebody has to stand and what they're going to do. It is a long, slow build-up, but it's a dangerous mission. And we know not everybody's going to get through. And not only do you pick up on the sense that it is a dangerous mission, and they know that not all of them are going to make it, but as opposed to, say, The Force Awakens, where they said, Starkiller base is over there, jump on the ships and let's fly, right? It's like, that's bullshit. In real life, you would sit and like for something like this, you would sit and analyze it to the nth degree, and we're seeing all that. And all it's doing is like making us think, what's it actually going to be like when they get to the base? Is it all going to go straight to plan? Or is it going to go hell in a handbasket? And yeah, I like it.
There were a lot of things, and I think it'll probably come up. So if I'm jumping ahead, tell me, that were like that, where stuff happened and you expected it to go one way and it didn't. And one of them was the flyover by the TIE fighters. And you see the TIE fighters and you think, oh, they're rumbled. And they weren't. The TIE fighters just flew over, checked out some farmers and left. And I was like, oh, that's different from what I thought it would go in a Star Wars story.
Yeah. Eds has come up with an interesting one. Different worlds, different levels of technology, and different levels of reliance on technology. Some worlds may still place value on the whole Nook thing. I don't know what the Nook part is, but that is relevant to real life here. I mean, it's the old thing when your iPhone doesn't work, it's a first world problem. You know, over in different parts like in Africa and all the rest of it, just trying to survive is the key thing. So yeah, it could be like that. And obviously in Aldani, they're just working with what they've got. So yeah, there's some depth into that. Ads has said the people that are hating this are probably the same people screaming for something different. That is a very good observation, actually. So they've said, all right, you've been bitching and moaning and complaining about what you've been getting. We'll give you this. And they're still bitching and moaning and complaining. As has been pointed out, the people who hate Star Wars the most are Star Wars fans.
Maybe the Nook thing was book thing.
Oh, yeah, it might have been the book thing. Yeah, sorry. So, yes, and that's the thing. So that's why it isn't going to work for everybody, as we've said before. But for those who it is working for, it's going really, really well. I like this one. Who pissed off the director to get the goat horning duty? Yeah, sticking the goats horns on the goats. Yeah, you reckon those goats wouldn't have been happy about it either? Right? Stay, you little bastard! Sticking horns.
Just imagine the call sheets.
Whatever.
The call sheets: 30 black goats and a guy with extra horns and super glue.
Yeah, exactly right. I like this one, Gavin. Yeah, you don't need technology for survival. The Ewoks used only primitive things, but the Ewoks didn't know any different. That's the thing. In our world, if we had all of our technology removed today, half of Australia would be frigging starving to death by the end of the week. So, yeah, okay, it was book. Yep, thank you. No worries. Very, very good. All right, so love this one. I mean, there's nuggets everywhere, right? And you see things you go, I have never seen that before. That is absolutely fantastic. And I've got to say, I loved it. It's the old galaxy far, far away version of a dartboard. How good is that? There's the triple 20 just about here somewhere. What do you reckon, dude?
You do wonder if it's those electronic ones, so when you hit it, it lights up wherever they throw it. But yeah, I did think that was funny, and it's all to do with the ceremony that's coming up, isn't it?
Yep.
So
It's fantastic. We're seeing things in this series that you never see anywhere in the Star Wars universe, and they're treating it seriously. And I really love that. Now, this one come up, and I thought, okay, first things first, fantastic image. I love the fact that you got the two guys and the thing in the background. But he said because he's looking for who are the guys who are supposed to be cleaning up the mess? The commandant's wife. How German is that? Not the commander, not the admiral, not the general, the commandant's wife needed help for moving furniture. I thought it's like lieutenant. We had lieutenant a couple of episodes ago, or the last episode, I think it was, and now we've got commandant. What do you reckon of that?
well, I think, maybe I'm giving the writers too much credit, but the galaxy is so broad and made up with so many different people that, when they pull different people together, I just guess they use different words that are more the correct version on their planet when they're talking basic. But you are absolutely right. It definitely goes against what we've seen the Empire before. It was a very standard, uniform way of describing ranks and everything. So, yeah, I thought that was interesting too. Maybe it's also commandant sounds a bit more evil than commander or something like that.
Well, a commandant is usually in charge of a concentration camp or a prison camp, right? Especially in wartime.
Yeah.
That's why I was so surprised to hear the term. And now we don't know who the commandant is or whether he or she, I know it could be one of either, whether they're in charge of a base or a prison or whatever, and they're not part of the imperial machine, right? So they're not part of the army or the navy or whatever. And maybe they're a private group, and for that reason, the word commandant would make sense. But clearly, this person has enough authority to pull people away from the Empire to move furniture around for the missus. So I was just surprised to hear that term. I go, so we've had, as I said, we've had lieutenant, which threw me off, and we've had commandant. I go, very interesting. Not a bad thing, but that's just really left field. And of course, Gorn, once he realizes these troops have been pulled away to help move the commandant's wife's furniture, he ain't going to complain about it. He said, all right, fine. So this person's clearly got a bit of authority. So,
yeah.
Yes.
One thing we do know, just don't turn around. Don't worry, it's a pop reference.
Yeah, no, I just can't think that way. Very, very good. All right, so we jump over to Ferrix. So we haven't seen Ferrix for a little while. Okay, that's where all the shit went down in episode 3. I do like this. And we jump to Ferrix, and there's still no stormtroopers, even though the Empire's moving in. In fact, you got these guys instead. And I thought, isn't this interesting? And I got a theory as to why there are no stormtroopers about, and I'm going to bring it up a bit later on, right? So don't try and second guess it at this point, but I thought it was cool. It's the old thing of like, Blevin is watching the action, and I don't know if this is the locals are cleaning up the mess from the 3rd episode where, the vehicle blew up and all the rest of it, but it certainly gives that impression, right? So these are all the locals. The Imperials have moved in. It's like, yeah, good on you guys. This was cool, right? It's the whole thing of like, to the victor go the spoils. The hotel. You want it as you HQ. No one's going to complain. No one's going to bitch and moan about it. They're already moving people out of it. And I thought, how about that? That's the typical thing of just marching into town saying, yep, we want that big hotel. It's ours. And he actually says to the other guy, I think his name is Tika or Tita or something, do you want it? He's like giving it to him as a gift practically. How's that for just, we're in town and we're just going to do whatever we want. What do you reckon of that, dude?
Well, I thought the whole thing was interesting in that what you were saying is absolutely right, where it's a different Imperial takeover from what you think, because they go, well, now you've stuffed it. Now the Imperials are going to come in and have to rule the system. And you think, yep, that's all going to be stormtroopers and heavy-handedness. But it's not. It's a bureaucratic takeover where they've just taken away the control from the people who were there, and they've just installed their own leaders. And so it's a sort of a more clandestine takeover, because you don't see the stormtroopers in the street, but the Empire is slowly spreading through all the systems and taking over the leadership of the security.
True. And I love it. He just says to the guy, do you want that one? You can have that one or that one. You can pick whatever you want. And it's the biggest thing. Like, I think we showed a shot ages ago of the overview of Ferrix, right? And we said, this is the tower where the dude bangs your drums. And there was a big building on the left. We didn't know what it was at the time. Turned out it's the hotel. So they picked the biggest place in town. They said, there's your HQ. Do you want that? And he goes, oh, yeah, we're cleaning out the locals, cleaning out whoever's left. It's like, how is that for just being bastards, eh? So, but that's how their mindset works. We're an authority. You're not. At this point, it's been 14 years. They wouldn't know any difference. So
yeah, I find it fascinating because I think a lot of these systems that know of the Empire and the Empire's in charge haven't really been taken over. So you get people like Khan who admire the Empire and the ideals that they stand for, but surely those type of people think the Empire is going to do good. But when the Empire move in and they go like clean out the people there, you can live there and stuff. Surely the people who do think the Empire has ideals are then seeing, oh no, this isn't good. This isn't good for the normal people. And I am wondering if Khan, who looks like he's going to get revenge on Andor, will actually be seeing the Empire is not, the upstanding, and there's a lot of different ways to absorb what's going on at the moment.
Yeah, you're right, and we're not sure how it's going to play out. But the locals here, who used to, as I said, they never used to really see the Morlana, the More Core, or whatever they're called, the Corporate Sector guys popping in on a regular, the Blues, right? Now the Empire's right on their doorstep, and be like, yeah, okay, they're here all the time now. And only if they get a bit aggro towards the local dudes, the local Imperial people, clearly then that's when the Stormtroopers and those guys will start moving in and going, all right, we'll kick a few heads now. So you can see this is going to go from bad to worse pretty quickly. Now, a couple of things I've got to bring up. We're talking about the Commandant comment earlier. Chrissy made a point saying they're going back to Allies Nazi anthologies and analogies, sorry. Adzi has said about associating with the Empire with Nazism. That's been a known fact since Star Wars, the original A New Hope. I mean, the Imperial Empire was based off the Third Reich with the uniforms, the Jotfas. That's a known fact. So there's nothing new there. This is cool, right? So one of the things, once again, I know we're saying there's a lot of things about this show we don't normally get to see. And one of the things you do get to see is this general conversation between guys we don't even know much about, right? It was Captain Tego, right? He wants to be called a prefect. Do you mind if I get called prefect? And of course, Blevin, I think is the guy on the right, says, oh, you can wear a ball gown as far as I'm concerned. Oh, what a line. And he says that, but Tego says there's no additional pay. And that's an important line because that links into the payroll that's about to be stolen tomorrow, right? So once again, the people working in the Empire aren't doing it for free. They're doing it for the money, right? So he wants to be known as a prefect. Clearly, it's an ego boost. I'm the prefect of Ferrix. How good am I? Not getting any extra money for it, but he's still getting paid to be there. And that's something we've never covered off before in the Star Wars universe. Is the Empire paid to do what they're doing? And now we know that they do. And of course, and we do know that they're going to steal the money because that's clearly where the alliance is going to get formed. What happens to all these guys? Do they all get the shits because they can't pay their rent and they've got to pay their bills and whatever? It'd be curious to see where it all leads.
It is one of those, again, I say it all the time, it's one of those interesting things that there is still the concept of physical money there, where you think in such a advanced technological society, the Empire would be doing everything through electronics. Why would you need to take credits from planet to pay your army when you can just wire it across? Maybe there is a reason for that, or maybe they want to stay with physical money, but it does seem like having the physical money tempts the rebellion to steal it, kind of thing.
Yeah, but I think in the galaxy far, far away concept, it's easy to carry physical credits from planet to planet because then you'd have to arrange connectivity between them all. How do you transfer funds across galaxies, for example, as opposed to carrying a physical item? Now, of course, in A New Hope, when Han said sorry about the mess and chucked the bartender money with it, they're carrying hard currency. Now, back in the 70s, that was standard, right? So by default, today's standards, you're right, everything would be electronic. But in the galaxy far, far away, where the distances are so vast that I don't think it would be feasible to sort of do that. Maybe the rich people can do it, but the poor people can't. I don't know. You'd have to sit and have a really good discussion about why they haven't gone down that route. But I think it's just the complications of distance would be too difficult. I've gone to an ATM on Coruscant, but I currently live on Jakku, for example. And of course, how does that work? So anyway, I thought this may have been a bit of a cock up, right? So once again, we're seeing the whole build-up of the guys preparing for their mission. And Cassian thinks that Arvel and Taramyn, they're the two guys in the front, should swap sides because they're holding the guns differently. But I looked at this and I thought, I would argue that these two are doing it correctly because their guns are being facing outwards. Whereas Cassian and this guy, his name I keep forgetting, they're pointing their guns at each other. So when I looked at this scene straight away, I go, oh, the guys at the back need to swap because that's just got bad news written all over it. They're going to blow each other's heads off. So, but in the scene, Cassian tells Vel that these two need to swap. So I don't know if you picked up on that at all, but left-handed, right-handed, all this sort of thing.
I didn't see that at all. I did think what was very cool when they start asking Cassian, is Val right-handed? And he can go around and he's observed and knows who's right-handed and who's left-handed, obviously blowing all their other experience out the window, because I'm sure they've probably, as you said, lived together for months. And if they asked each other, half of them wouldn't know if they were left-handed or right-handed.
And the funny thing is that every stormtrooper where we see marching, they're always right-handed, right? They're always placing the guns in the right direction. So when I saw that, I go, why are they holding their guns left and right? Even the left-hand guys should theoretically be holding them to the right-handed. So I thought it was an interesting sort of thing. And but yeah, the two front guys are pointing them outwards, and the two back guys are pointing them inwards. And I go, yeah, I don't know about that. And you know, I picked up on it, but it's good to see they had to do the marching. And once again, they're still trying to learn to be Imperial troops and all the rest of it. So it's just building up for what's going to happen, hopefully, in the next episode.
Did you pick up on that on the first watch, or did you?
Straight away. As soon as I saw it, I go, oh, that's interesting. They're pointing them in different directions, and it's like even like the Imperial Royal Guards always hold the staff on the right hand side. All the stormtroopers have always held them in one way. So yeah. So I don't know. I thought it was rather interesting, but I thought, oh, dude, mate, you're pointing the gun at each other's heads. that can't be good.
Well spotted, Dags. 10 extra points for that one.
Thank you very much. So regarding the finances, Christy said that cash is anonymous. I think in the galaxy far, far away, they don't need to sort of match our real world. I mean, you've seen it with the technology. No one's holding iPads and iPhones. It's all old school. And, you know, we've still got phone boxes, for crying out loud, as we saw a few episodes back. So being a bit old school kind of still works. Having said that, on Coruscant, if you lived and breathed on Coruscant, maybe things are completely different and there is no physical currency. But clearly out in the boondocks, there is. Guy said stormtroopers are clones. They are not clones. They are conscripts. So just be wary of that. The clones, after the Clone Wars, all got phased out, and the conscripts started almost straight away. And I think there's even an episode of Rebels where Clone Troopers Rex comes across stormtroopers and he's trying to say these guys are badly trained. So that is not correct. Once again, we saw this last episode with a TIE fighter flying past, and I thought, how grouse was this? The super low flyby and the loud noise. I thought, crank up that volume, kids. That is awesome. What do you reckon? That was a really, really good moment. And suddenly a TIE fighter by itself is considered a massive threat. And I thought that was very, very cool. What do you reckon?
Well, that's what I was mentioning earlier, where it sort of didn't go the way I thought, because you see a TIE fighter fly over a bunch of the rebellion and then you expect half an hour later all the stormtroopers to turn up. But it just did a flyby, thought they were farmers and didn't come back. So it actually was, by not going down that sort of predictable route, I was actually impressed they did that.
Yep. Yeah, and the fact that it flew so low to the ground, and that's the thing, they do make noise, right? Yeah. And of course, like it's like a jet fighter blasting that close to the ground. It was like, oh my god, like an F-15. It was like, Jesus Christ, your eardrums are exploding. So it's great that they did that, and like the shock wave of the sound. I thought that was fantastic. Now I don't know if you picked up on this. One of the things that the show has, a lot of Star Wars series have by default, is really good imagery, really good detail, absolutely fantastic. And in Andor, they've really just touched on small things, and you go, that is really clever, and most people will not have even noticed it, right? So as the TIE fighter flies over the water, it actually sprays onto the camera. Did you pick up on that?
Yeah, I did pick on that, and that's that sort of added realism that sometimes they do. I can't remember if they've done that in Star Wars before. Have they had anything hit the camera? I feel like maybe J.J. Abrams might have done it, but I can't remember where.
No. You can... There may have been an instance with blood on the camera, blood splashing of blood. That may have occurred in Force Awakens. I don't know. Certainly not with water splashing. Sometimes you get heat hazes behind ships. That I've known that happen before. But that, I mean, theoretically this should happen because where the camera, as it were. But it's actually splashing onto the camera. I thought that is very good. It may have happened, and it's so subtle you don't even notice it. You're too busy looking at the ship and go, that is just brilliant. Oh, I love stuff like that. So. Yeah. So Guy said, yeah, you're right. Clone troopers would all hold the guns the same way. Yep, that's correct. So yes, that's indeed the way to go. All right. So we're at the base, right? And I thought this was an interesting sort of moment. There's a lot of good stuff that goes on in this show. So Kimsey, that's the guy on the left, comes out. He's having a look. I thought he was going to jump off the way he was sort of hanging over the balcony there. And the way he talks, he seems concerned about the new airfield that they're going to build. So the Empire doing what the Empire does is just going to level the entire valley, put an airfield in, right? But then starts adding in all the racist comments about the Dani, who are the local population. And Gorn, of course, has to go along with it, even though you can clearly see that he doesn't agree. So it's just one of those things. And so Kimsey, who for a moment there seems sympathetic to the locals, clearly is just pushing the pro-imperial sort of mindset. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting where you get his point of view, and then you get the cleaning crew or the painting crew later, and although they're racist and inquisitive, they are interested in them because they actually want to see this event that's going to happen as well. So
yeah,
it isn't black and white. There are shades of grey in the characterizations.
Yeah, totally agree. And Greg's in the opposite to me. He's not a fan of the whole splashing on the camera thing. It does take you out of the fantasy. That's fair enough. That's probably why they did it really subtly. So, I guess it's each their own, really. But I thought it was really cool. All right, so we jump off to the ISB. Remember, we've got this whole thing going on with Dedra trying to find out where the star part thing came from, right? The one that Cassian stole. That whole subplot, the MacGuffin that we completely forgot about, right? Work on the late shift. I did like this. He says, it's getting late. They've got to go home. Once again, no one's ever discussed time in the Imperial Empire. It's always just been we're here to work. But no, all of a sudden it's getting late. He wants to go home. And I thought, I think his name is pronounced Hurt. And I was thinking, does he have a crush on Dedra? Because he opts to stay back. If you're staying back, I'll stay back too. So I don't know. I just thought that was really interesting. But clearly both of them are the dog with a bone scenario. They're trying to find out what's going on, what the story is. And we get to learn a lot from this sequence. But how did you find this?
Again, I thought it was interesting. I don't think it's a crush situation. I think it's just a camaraderie because they're in the same office and they want the same goal. I might be wrong. I just thought it wasn't played on enough to be a crush, and it just looked like they're dedicated Imperial officers.
Could be too. I just thought when he said, well, if you're going to stay back, I'll stay back too. And clearly he's not going to put the moves on it because, he freaking get kicked, his head kicked from here to Christmas. But I just thought I'd just go with it. And I thought, well, maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. And most people say, yeah, but it's late, I'm buggering off. But it's like, nah, you're right. Oh, you're staying, I'm staying. So I don't know. It could be the same thing.
Late, let's take our fuels kind of thing.
Yeah, which I'm going to show in a sec. I like this one where Christy said, hey, how does Greg handle the lens flares? I mean, there's millions of those. That definitely shows that there's a camera in the room. Suddenly we got name dropped all this Easter egg stuff, right? So everything is rested. Hosnian Prime, which they pronounce as Hosnian Prime. Kessel, Fondor, which is where the Imperial shipyards are. Jakku. Why the hell would Jakku get mentioned? It's like, there's just a freaking desert planet. So apparently there's something going on out there. And the proton warheads come from a place called Base K. Base K. I thought that was interesting. So we've got two planets that are referenced from the sequel trilogy. Okay. Yeah, I thought that was interesting. So how about that?
It is a case to me where you sort of go, there's 1,000 star systems and stuff like that, yet they only come up with those 3 or 4 different names like Kessel and all that over and over again. Sometimes I just kind of wish they'd expand the universe by making up new names.
It's tricky, isn't it? It works for some, doesn't work for others. Some people say, oh, mate, you've just given me a nugget. Oh, I'm so happy. But you're right. Like Base K, for example, it's the first time that's ever been mentioned, whereas all the others get mentioned all the time. So, but I thought Jakku, we would have thought there was some Imperial stuff going on in Jakku. So
same with Kessel. Kessel is more where they're mining spice, and you wouldn't think it's really an Imperial thing. And Jakku is just a desert planet with the back end of nowhere like Tatooine. So that's why I was a bit surprised that they were getting name checked.
Maybe Chrissy's right. They're throwing a fans a bone of familiarity. So far, we haven't had very little in this episode. So there's got to dangle something for the fans. So they go, oh my God, mate, how good's this? I don't know. So, yes, very, very cool. All right. So you get some fantastic dialogue. One of the great lines is, as Hertz says, it's too random to be random. Don't you love that? Eh?
That was
and as
really...
we know, Dedra's suspicions about what's going on are all going to be validated tomorrow. So, but too random to be random. How's that for analysing something? Yeah,
what I thought was really cool, it proves the beginnings of the Rebels are doing really well because they're doing stuff so at random, but the Empire is one step ahead of them because there's someone there that's saying it's too random to be random. Like, they're pretty good. You like these guys, I think.
Yeah, as Dedra says, no one ever jumps the same fence twice. And but at this point, as we've mentioned before in previous episodes, the alliance hasn't been established. The rebellion is still very, very new. So they're just like cherry picking bits here, there, and everywhere. And it's only because Dedra's decided to go down the Sherlock Holmes route and sort of really investigate this. She's joining the dots. And you can imagine after the attack on the base tomorrow and the money gets swiped, as we've said before, she's going to be going, well, I kind of predicted it. The other guy I think it's Blevin, he's been going, holy shit. And it's like, and no one can get paid. It could put a massive crack into the whole Imperial system.
The scene that I thought was missing, and I don't know if it would have been good or not, is where they pull up on a screen and show where all the random stuff had happened, and where there's the big non-area where nothing's happened. They go, well, not what's happening here in the next couple of days, because nothing's happened here. And he goes, this. Oh, there's the Imperial pay thing happening, and then she being able to predict it would have been a really awesome thing.
It's certainly possible, remembering that because the alliance isn't established, it could be just individual pockets like we've got in Rebels with Lothal. Like just things are just happening just randomly. So, but yeah, well, right. I mean, she could have just looked at it and said, "Oh yeah, Aldani's pretty quiet at the moment. Oh, there's a big payroll. Maybe that's you do some dodgy dot fixing. And you go, well, maybe the next one's going to be there. But she wouldn't think it's going to happen tomorrow. So
the scene that would have been cool is the old guy who basically said you're good, but you're being too keen. If they go in and go, we've been up all night, and like there's a pattern, it's random because it's too random, and we think this is going to happen, and he just goes, you've been up all night, like have a shift off, and then when it happens and he didn't listen, then he's like, okay, now you get the promotion above this other guy, kind of thing.
Yep, totally agree with you. All right, so firsts, we love our firsts, right? We've got the shows like ticket up all these green boxes are first. First time we've not seen Tic Tacs. She's taking drugs, probably stimulants to keep awake. I thought, good on them. And they're pills. They're not like a shot in the arm or a friggin' back thing in the head or whatever. I thought that was great. So she said, all right, we're going to work a couple more files, bang, a couple of pills in, and off we go. And I thought, well done. And some people will probably not like that. They're going, oh, hang on, this is getting way too true to life now. Because once you start doing shit like that, then obviously you get addicted and it's not going to end well. But I liked it. I thought it was good. So, yeah, she's a pill popper.
Because it actually pulled up a difference between them and the rebellion, where a couple of episodes later, he's swigging the brew, which is like that homemade stuff, and the Empire's got the pills. Like, are you sure that your men are on the right pills, Captain? Kind of thing.
Very good. Flash Gordon quote there. Nicely done. So, yeah, so they're popping pills. That's another green tick. Okay, we've never seen that in the Star Wars universe before. So, very, very cool. So we got another campfire scene, and after months of waiting, and we really do feel like after all these episodes, it has been months, that it would be a nervous time for our troops. And that they know that not all of them are likely to come back. And I actually quite thought that was actually kind of cool. We get to learn a bit more about Gorn. Okay, so remember, everyone has their own rebellion. And because that becomes a bit of a familiar trait within these stories about the fact that people who serve the Empire, but the Empire sort of gives them a kick in the guts, and they turn against their masters, so to speak. We see it in other shows as well. So at least we know why Gorn is becoming a rebel sympathizer, even as we said at this stage, the Rebel Alliance doesn't really exist. And Gorn himself still has a soft side. But yeah, Aldani is not a popular posting. And once again, there's still no stormtroopers. And the reason why I think there are no stormtroopers, as to this point, there haven't been any threats, right? All the stuff we know from Star Wars, the attack on the Death Star and Hoth base, they haven't happened yet, right? So maybe the stormtroopers and the entire Imperial Army, they're all on Mimban or wherever they are, but places aren't posting these guys on these outposts because they've got no need to. Like Aldani, for example, there's no one around. Place is completely deserted. So why would you have stormtroopers when you don't need them? Maybe on Ferrix they're saying the population is pretty docile. We don't need stormtroopers going there muscling people up. Having said that, once a robbery occurs tomorrow, everything's going to change, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the thing that our characters, I think, like Mon Mothma and Luthen and probably people like Bail Organa will be aware that once the robbery occurs and the Empire is not happy, they are then going to go, all right, we're going to give you the full the full beans treatment. We're going to send in all the troops, locking everybody up, and that's where the real crush of the Empire is going to take place. And I think that's actually important. That's why we haven't seen stormtroopers to this point. What do you reckon?
Well, the other thing is when Andor was talking to Luthen a couple of episodes ago, he was like, well, it's the Empire's arrogance. You can just walk straight in there because no one thinks they'll dare. So you've got that confidence, and it's on a planet full of goat farmers. So the Empire really not expecting, a heist by the rebellion with the tactics. And he's going with the tactics. He did tell to Luthen they are going to dress as the Empire and just walk straight in there.
Yep. And it's obviously going to work. And then the next day after that, they walk out with all their money, which we're going to show right here. It's the Galaxy Far, Far Away version of Fort Knox, right? And after that, the clamps are going to be nice and tight on top of everybody. And for a victory. And, of course, the problem then, and this would happen in real life too, is that people who have got no affiliation to the Alliance or the Rebellion whatsoever are all going to get picked on, right? It arrests the usual suspects scenario. So even those dudes walking in the street, bang, we're going to be picked up. What do you know about the Rebel Alliance? Da da da. And they're going to go, I don't know anything. I'm completely innocent. And that's why the pressure. We'll probably see it in this series too, where everything is just changed from being serene and quiet and goats with a shitload of horns over to like what happens the next day. And you can imagine the characters on Ferrix, right? So you got the dude who said, I want the hotel. I'll base myself in there. Suddenly, they're all going to be barging in with the stormtroopers, arresting everybody, and just causing a massive amount of hate mayhem. So there's going to be a price to pay for the success that they're going to have after the robbery. Very good stuff.
Well, the other thing is it's been filled in a few little gaps with the animated series from different timelines and stuff. But the Empire, when the Emperor took over and announced the Galactic Empire, he didn't announce martial law and it was the Iron Fist. It was just a changing of the system. But through this, we're seeing why it tightens up and why they strengthen their grip and how they get rid of the the last vestiges of the Republic and the Senate. So I think that's where we are now, and that's why the freedom fighters are at the point where they've got to do something about it, because like you said, once you change something, you can't go back. And the politicians have seen this, but when they do this raid, I think the populace of planets are going to see this, where they're like, okay, now we've got to have stormtroopers and martial law, and you can't be trusted, and we've got to rule with an iron fist. That's where I think it's going.
And I think you're right, because I just realised the first season of Rebels occurs at the same year as this show, right? Now, on Lothal, there are stormtroopers everywhere. Now, to be fair, there's a base there building TIE fighters and whatever, right? And we haven't seen any stormtroopers at all at this point. So it's possible that the first season of Rebels occurs after the robbery that occurs here tomorrow, right? Yeah. And the Empire says, all right, fine, that's it. Release the hounds, and the troops are everywhere all of a sudden. So Ferrix will have thousands of them, and all these other places. And that's why Lothal probably gets the stormtrooper treatment. So even though they're set in the same year, the first season of Rebels might be 3 days after this particular event that's about to occur tomorrow. So give or take. I think that makes a lot of sense, actually. I reckon it's very, very cool. So it's very well thought out. You're right, Adzi. You'll become like occupied France. That's exactly right. So it's almost like saying, well, if these rebels, whoever they happen to be, are going to steal from us, well, we're going to make them pay for it. And unfortunately, it's the innocent who pay, as they say. All right, so we get to hear about this engineer who's rolling. I love this detail, right? So it's like engineers coming tomorrow. There's the ship. It's like a Lambda class shuttle that I think from way over there. Yeah. You do wonder who's the engineer. Some people have said it might be Krennic, but I don't know why he'd be on the Death Star.
Surely, Dags, I think, isn't it going to be Babu Frick?
Good on you. There's a lot of talk about this engineer, and they've obviously moved all the furniture around to accommodate this dude. So he's pretty important. She. So I'm very keen to see who that person happens to be.
He's in this very, very cool. He was in the trailer. Wasn't Babu Frick in the trailer?
Was he? I only saw the trailer once, and that was I can't even remember. So
that's who I thought, because I thought they were expecting this great engineer, and then he's going to toddle out.
So after showing no aliens at all in this entire series except for six-legged horned goats, Babu Frick makes it a. Oh God, that would turn a serious show into a bit of a joke, wouldn't it? I like this one. Right, the truth comes out. Just like Han Solo, he's only in it for the money. And I thought that was kind of groovy, eh? It's like, finally, I'm here for the dollars. So and I thought that was actually a good moment. You look at the way they're all dressed. You'd swear they're like Hebrew, what do you call it? People who sort of go through the deserts and
nomads.
Yeah, Luke, nomads. So finally, that's what it's all about. He's here for the money. And of course, we know that's not going to be the case. Sorry, I cut you off, dude.
Sorry, it's one of those things where if you make good decisions, you are rewarded, because Han Solo over his time slowly changed his calls to the rebellion and became a much, not shoot first person, and survives and gets to marry a princess. Andor, sort of, you see, he says, I've done bad things for the rebellion and sort of that, and he gets blown up on a planet, doesn't get the princess.
You can probably put a couple of things together after the robbery takes place, and as I said, the Empire sort of kicks into high gear and starts really harassing everybody. You'll probably find out Marva back on Ferrix will probably be arrested because there's a link to Andor and whatever, and probably doesn't end well for her. So he's got no reason. No, he hasn't got a reason to go back to Ferrix. He sticks with the Alliance and supports the cause. So you are right. It's echoing the same path that Solo went down. But Solo stuck around mainly because of the whole thing with Leia and all this sort of thing. At the hots for her, whereas Cassian, he really will be the freedom fighter. Sorry, man, what was that?
We do know from Rogue One, Cassian does not look like the man who's got like 200,000 credits in his bank account, does he?
No, he does not. So maybe he's like the whole thing. He's got the money in his pockets, but he sees all the poor people over there and just says, "All right, I'll give it to the kids instead." I saw this. And I thought, I love the imagery. Oh, the imagery in this is fantastic. But I looked at this. I thought, it's the base. It looks like Force 10 from Navarone, doesn't it? It's got the whole thing with the dam and the big wall and all sort of thing. And I thought that was kind of groovy. And I like it. Okay, so this is one for the prop makers out there, whether it be Seiko or Timex or even a Rolex or Tag Heuer. Good old Gorn's got a wristwatch. I thought, how good's this? So if you're a prop making sort of dude, go out there, make yourself a Star Wars approved Imperial issued wristwatch. How good's that?
or buy one from Ronnie on AliExpress coming soon.
Yeah, exactly right. Someone's bound to make a copy of that at some point. And I do like the fact that, okay, so there's signaling going on between our heroes and Gorn, and as I said, they've been visiting up there for months. That's how the dude was able to make the model. All good. I think that's it for those guys, right? And I got to the end of this episode. We've got to wait a week for this friggin' attack. Oh my God, what's the deal with that? We jump back to Coruscant, and I love this. It's the equivalent of the presidential limo, complete with no seatbelts and an awkward distance between occupants. Cut the tension with a knife. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I thought this scene was great, and doesn't like you said earlier, doesn't even know the name of the driver, has to ask.
Love it. Absolutely fantastic. So Mon's got a new charitable foundation. Clearly that has not been set up by accident. And of course, she knows that there's going to be money coming in, assuming the mission succeeds, and it'll all be poured into this charitable foundation. That's inverted commas, charitable foundation. So there's a lot of pressure with a lot of people, and everything's hinging on everything working. So I thought that was really cool. And you are right. Perrin still doesn't know Cloris's name. So shame it wasn't James. Then he could have said at home, James, and don't spare the horses. So that goes to show just the separation between the elite and the guys at the lower end of town. It's like, here's your driver. What's his name? I don't know, and I really don't care. There's a lot to be said in that. So, yeah.
Well, I hadn't even thought about it until we had this discussion tonight about physical money via transfer money and stuff like that. So she's going to get like them turn up somehow and give them all this money for her charitable organization, or is it going to be fenced through Lotha's shop, or what's going to happen there?
I think we'll take some guesses at the end. I think I've got a gut feeling as to what will happen. Could have called the driver Parker. Yeah, that would have been kind of funny. Bit hard to say yes, my lady, when it's a bloke asking for her to for them to drive to go somewhere. Some people did pick up on this, and I did notice it, and I thought maybe it's a budget thing. There seems to be a lot of distinct lack of traffic in Coruscant. In the prequel trilogy, there was bloody cars and things flying everywhere. In this, you do see some, but nowhere near as many. Now, it could be just late at night, to be fair. And this scene you do see a couple in the background, but I think maybe from a budget perspective, they can't put in as many as they once did, unless, of course, there is a restriction on air traffic. And I like the fact that Perrin says use an expressway. I said, how can you use an expressway when you're just flying in the air? Everything would just be straight, wouldn't it?
I don't know. They must have some kind of sensors so they don't crash. So then maybe there's expressway, maybe there's the back streets. I just presume there was less traffic because the Empire had taken over, and a lot of people probably fled from there because that is the seat of where the Emperor lives. Obviously, they don't like alien races, and when we saw in the prequels, a lot of it was loaded with alien races. So maybe they were the first ones to get across the border before the real clamps come down.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that, actually. Adzi made a point that saying the driver has changed from the last episode. Yeah, because the last one was a temporary dude. So it's possible that Clovis, is that his name? Cloris. See, I can't think of Cloris. Maybe he's aware of what Mon's up to, because they gave the impression last time that the new driver may have been a bit of a shifty dude. Who knows? But yes, so that dude was just the temporary guy, whereas this could be the regular, and Perrin still doesn't know his name, which I think is kind of interesting. In our final sequences, so we're back at what our class as Aaron's the Galaxy Far, Far Away collectible store, otherwise known as, we've got a name for it now, the Galactic Antiquities and Objects of Interest. What a funny... Why couldn't you call your store that?
Well, because the first store I was in was Antiquarian Records, which was pretty close. But no, I like Aaron's Collectibles better because I've got an ego.
Galactic Antiquities. Okay, I kind of work with that. Objects of Interest. What a wanky name.
You do realize as soon as that went up, someone registered that somewhere as an actual online trading shop or something.
Yeah, the problem is antiquities is hard to spell. You don't know where the Q's and U's and all that sort of stuff go. Galactic Antiquities.
Yeah,
That just sounds wanky, doesn't it? So last week when we saw the shop, we were picking out all the Easter eggs, and this time we're in the back room. We got to see things a bit clearly this time around. It was interesting to note that the holocrons from the Sith and the Jedi aren't exactly the same as what has been canonized. There's a variation to it, but I did see that I forgot what the stones are called. What are they called again from Temple of Doom?
The
Sankara stones.
Yeah.
Sankara.
Yeah.
Yeah, they kind of look like Sankara stones up there. But yeah, the holocrons aren't exactly the same. And I think that's intentional. They've sort of inspired by, even though the Sith one looks pretty close. Sorry,
they're
mate.
they're the ones you can buy from the gift shops in Black Spire Base in Disneyland. That's why they've changed them slightly, so you can go and get them on your next visit.
Yeah, exactly right. So Christy said I thought it was Sankara. What is it? Is it Shankara?
It's I think it's Shakara stones because they're small and humble.
Okay, very good. You're an idiot. So I got that joke too. At least I can pick up your jokes. So for those who are wondering, so the holocrons kind of look like holocrons, but they kind of don't. But the Sith one looks more closer than the Jedi one, which is kind of cool. But either way, your Sankara, I don't even know why they put them in there from Temple of Doom. That's a really left field kind of gag, but they've stuck them in, and away we go. So very good. One for the nerds out there. And of course, Luthen knows what's going to happen tomorrow, right? And they're going to have a massive funding boost, assuming the mission goes ahead. And of course, the Empire is not going to be happy. He knows this. And of course, there are two connections leading back to him. And that's Val and Cassian. And I think he's now starting to doubt the whole Cassian thing. So that was particularly cool. And just finally, there's a bit of symbolism everywhere you look. I like this one. They turn the lights off and they shut the door. When one door shuts, as they say, another one opens. And that is going to occur in their timeline tomorrow. What do you reckon they do?
I thought it was a good scene, a good way to sort of wrap up the episode. And it's good because I didn't want it to end.
Yeah, I got to the end and go, oh, you killed me. Yeah. Now, Christy, before we go any further in our discussion, we need your yawns, thanks. Don't forget, the more yawns, the worse it was. The less yawns, the better it was. I agree with you. I was like, oh, mate, you're killing me. I can't wait for this. And I really can't. I'm hanging out for Wednesday night to see what happens. So hopefully the freaking thing takes place. If they drag it out for another episode, then it will be too long. So...
yeah. So I probably didn't think it was as good as last week because this is the slow burn before the action episode again. But I understand why they're doing this in this series, so I don't mind it. If I was to rate it out of 10, probably about a 7.
Yep. I totally agree with you on that one, which is funny, isn't it? So we're dialing into a show which is so anti-Star Wars effectively. And I think based on the previous shows that we've had, Kenobi, Obi-Wan, Kenobi, Mandalorian, and Boba Fett is so different to them that it's actually working because it is different. There you go. It's just the way it goes. Now, from Chrissy's perspective, she's gone for the full 8 yawns, which means that's a 2 out of 10. So she's not the happiest cat. She wasn't a fan of it to start with, and I think I can understand if you didn't like episode 1 and 2, you're definitely not going to like this one. So, so Christy didn't rate it very highly at all. So, which is understandable. I mean, as we said earlier, it's dividing the fans left and right all over the place. So,
what I really love is Christy comes along every week, even though sometimes she doesn't enjoy the stuff. So, thanks for being with us and giving us your point of view with the yawns, because I do think that this is a show that does divide people a lot.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. It's the whole car crash scenario. It's like I don't want to watch it, but I can't not watch it because I'm curious to see what happens. And I think, when it's all said and done, and someone says, "Oh, was it 12 or 13 episodes?" and someone binge watches the whole lot, probably 10 hours worth, it may be like, "Oh my God, you're killing me!" But because we're doing this week to week, it kind of is working. But I can imagine a few people have already dropped off by now, and it's just like, just get to the action bits, but. I think because we've now worked out who all the characters are on Aldani, when they do die, they'll probably be like, oh, that's actually quite sad. Whereas normally you don't give a rat's ass. Like in Kenobi, we had the 2 snow speeders that took off at the end and we lost one. I forgot one of the guys who died. No one gave a shit about it. Who cares about him? I've forgotten his name already, right? Whereas in this, if someone carks it, you're going to feel it. So,
the interesting thing about that, more about the Imperial pleb that's talking about the rebels on the Wall of the Dam than you did about the guy that carked it in Obi-Wan.
That's a very, very good point. Everybody's got some kind of a story going on. Chrissy said, have to watch. Will it improve? I think it will, because we're about to see, we've had this long lead up as to the event that's going to occur. We're going to see the event and the repercussions of the event, right? Which is obviously the robbing of the thing. If Star Wars never existed, A New Hope and all that, you'd be thinking, I wonder what's going to happen. Will it succeed or not? But we know it's going to succeed because clearly the Alliance has to find funding to buy all these things to establish itself, right? And the repercussions of that and how it impacts ordinary citizens. And we've seen a lot of them so far. It's going to be very interesting. And that could be like where the traditional Star Wars feel kicks in. And when that happens, if it follows the same path, it could be quite dark and quite nasty. So you will get stormtroopers coming into Ferrix and Morlana 1 and really beating the shit out of people hardcore if they're going to go down that route, because we've seen already that the show's not afraid to pull a few punches. So it could be a little bit intense, I've got to say. So, yes.
Would be an interesting show if the main protagonist would shoot someone in the face when he's begging not to be killed, but the stormtroopers won't.
So the question will be whether any of the characters who have clearly got allegiances in a certain direction change. Will Dedra stay completely pro-Imperial, or will one of the other characters go, oh, no, I'm going to change my mind? And it's like, will parents suddenly go, oh, I'm going to become a good guy now that he knows that Mothma set up the Alliance? Or they're just going to stay as they are? I'm hoping they stay as they are, because one of the worst tropes in a lot of these shows is when you got a bad guy who suddenly turns into a good guy. I like the idea that they stay down that path. And I think if Dedra does that, that will be something that you don't normally see in these sort of shows, and I would enjoy it, actually. Yeah,
it's one of the main things I hate about pop culture, not just in Star Wars, how you have a bad guy and they're so popular as a bad guy, suddenly they have to go good. It's happened with like Harley Quinn and a whole lot of other things. It'd be good if Star Wars could avoid that.
Yeah, well, we saw that with Boba Fett, didn't we? So, a classic example. So we'll have to see what happens. But, yes, the next episode's in 2 days' time. So we'll have to bring it on, as they say. So what do you reckon there, Mr. Aaron?
I think the series so far has done a really good job of setting up all the chess pieces into the position they need to be. And over the next episode or two, we're going to see them strike. So I'm looking forward to it.
Isn't the Star Wars chess called the Dirac or something?
The Dirac, yeah.
Yeah. So we've set up all the Dirac pieces on the Millennium Falcon chessboard. Okay, and we'll just see what all goes. But I agree with you. It's all in play, and there's a few things we still don't know about yet, but we'll have to watch this space. So with that in mind, we will be back next Monday to talk about episode 6. Oh, can't wait. We'll have to see how it all goes. And before I forget, and don't forget, we've got our socials, so if you want to make sure you know what's going on in the world, just be sure to check out good old Sci-Fi Zone on the old Twitters and Instagrams and whatever else. And, of course, we talked about Aaron's store, the Galactic Antiquities and Objects of Interest. If you can't find that place, go to this place. So good old Aaron's Collectibles in Blackburn. What do you reckon then, Mr. Aaron? Your place has got chock full of stuff. No, you don't have any Andor stuff yet, do you? Or do you?
I think we have some Andor figures, but from Rogue One. But I tell you what, we've got more stuff in our store than he's got in his store. So it might not be quality, it's quantity, though.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, I like the sound of that. Objects of interest. Very, very cool. All right, we're going to leave you all to it. You party hard, everybody out there, and we will see you next Monday for episode 6 of Andor. Okay, take care.
Who is the mysterious Uncle Harlow? See you.
Oh, wouldn't it be funny if Harlow was the engineer who's been gone home? But yes, Uncle Harlow, that is the... Well, I love it. Absolutely fantastic. All right, we'll leave you to it, guys. See you next Monday, okay?
Have a good night. See you.
Okay, bye-bye.